Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as I show you what I do with my potted spring bulbs now that most of them have stopped blooming. I mostly have daffodils and tulips that were in my pots this spring. The first thing I have here is a Tete-a-tete daffodil. It looked so sweet in this pot. It was actually the first pot to bloom for me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the bulbs out of this pot. What I noticed about these bulbs was that they seem to be packed in very tightly in this pot. And while it put on a great show this spring, I want it to put on even a better show next spring. So I'm actually going to just take it all apart, divide it up, and I'm going to put half of these bulbs back into the same pot. And then I found another pot that's a good size, and I'm going to put half of the bulbs into this pot. So in order to just divide this, you want to loosen up the roots. And even though there's still green showing on the plant, I just want to make sure that when I plant these bulbs back in the pots, that the green remains, because I want to still be able to feed the bulbs of the daffodils for next season. If I cut them all back right now, it's not good for the bulb. It tells the bulb to stop growing, but I want them to keep growing. While I'm teasing them apart, I'm just checking the bulbs to make sure that there's no rotting going on, and also if I'm able to divide any of them, I'm going to divide them. So you can see the size difference with these bulbs. This one here is definitely larger than this one here. So hopefully this will still grow a little bit bigger this season and puts on a nice show for next spring. This was one that was joined together like this, and I just carefully teased it apart. That's how you would go ahead and divide that plant. Another really small bulb. Here's another one that's, you can see that there's a small bulb attached to a larger bulb. Very carefully, just going to tease it apart like that. So with these spring bulbs that were in the pots, I could do one of three things. I could now take these and put these out in my landscape. I'm not going to do that because I love the Tete-a-tete daffodil. They're so tiny and sweet. I feel like they would get lost in my garden or in the landscape unless I put them towards the front of a flower bed. But I really enjoyed them in the pots, so I want to do them in the pots again. So once the greenery had died back, maybe in another month, I could then have taken the bulbs out of a pot and just dried the bulbs in a shady spot for about a week, and then stored for the rest of the summer, and then plant these in the fall, either in a pot or in the landscape. So that's another option that I could do if I wanted to. And then the final option is to just put them back in a pot and keep them nice and wet, but not too wet, and definitely don't let them dry out, and just keep them watered outside during the summer. And then come fall time, I could bring these back into my garage and overwinter them again in the garage like I did last winter. And then when they're ready, they would sprout in my garage. My garage stays between 40 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit during the winter months, so it's a perfect place for me to be doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I go about just taking half of them and putting them in one pot and in another pot. And I'm also going to be using regular potting mix when I do this. And this is the potting mix that I made in one of my videos, so be sure to check that out. But let's go ahead and get these potted up. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and put some soil back in here. I'm going to mix it up with some of the other potting soil that I just made for this video because it has some nice compost mixed in there with it. I'm not giving any fertilizer right now. I just want the sun to give energy to the bulbs by doing photosynthesis and putting the energy through the leaves. So for right now, I'm not going to add any fertilizer. And if I do add some fertilizer, it will be after the foliage dies back. And I'm actually going to take a tiny bit out. The next thing is you want to make sure when you're planting your bulbs that you're planting them 2 to 3 times deeper than the size of the bulb. So I'm just surveying this and looking at if I need to pull a little bit more dirt out. I'd actually rather it be a tiny bit deeper than not in the pot because I want to make sure it doesn't just flop over. So I'm just going to check it. So I'd say the bulbs are about 1 inch tall. So I would say that this is about 3 inches deep. And I'm not going to follow the same type of spacing guideline that you normally would follow when you're planting bulbs in the landscape. I want these bulbs to put on a nice show next year. So I'm packing them in pretty tight. And I'm trying to mix it up so I have some larger bulbs and some smaller bulbs. But I'm giving enough room so that the bulbs can still grow during the summer months. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit potting mix in here. Shake it up. And I'm just going to hold these stems up. And then I can backfill as I go. This soil is definitely dry, so when I'm done, I'll give this pot a nice drink of water. And the big thing is to make sure that this stays watered, doesn't get too dry, and is in the sun, at least until the foliage dies back. And then after the foliage dies back, it doesn't need to be in the sun, but it still needs to be watered during the summer. All right, that one's done. Let's do the next one. Okay, I got this pot halfway full. I'm going to go ahead and place the rest of my bulbs in here. Figured it's a good time to do this job because I really want to update my porch and put a bunch of summer containers and pots on my porch. So I need to make room for that. Done. Let me go ahead and put some water in both of these pots, and then I'll show you the next pot we're going to work on together. So what we have over here are some daffodils that I basically collected out where my mother-in-law used to live. She had an area where she used to just dump all her yard waste and debris, and for whatever reason, there were thousands of daffodils also in that area. So unfortunately, she's not with us anymore for me to ask her, what was she thinking when she put all those daffodils out there? But all I know is since 2018, when she passed away, I go back every spring and I keep digging up more and more of those daffodils and putting them all around my yard in my landscape. So these three pots here are from that area. And two of the pots, this one here and that one over there, I planted these pots up last fall, and this spring they grew, and there was, I think, one blossom. To be honest with you, a lot of the daffodils were so tightly packed out in that area where she put all those bulbs. So they really need to be divided, and they need space to let the bulbs grow. So I'm fine with the fact that they didn't bloom. They actually were able to at least keep feeding the bulb. This third bucket back here is what I dug up this spring from that secret garden, is what I call it. And they're all mostly like a light yellow, or and some are a dark yellow color daffodil. They're just like a common daffodil, but they're still very beautiful to me. So I'm going to dump these out, and I'll show you what I'm going to do next. Look at the root system on this. Isn't that incredible? I'm just going to lightly tease these roots apart. And then the next thing I'm going to do is just start taking the bulbs apart from each other very carefully. And if you have just regular larger daffodils, you know that the bulbs typically get, I want to say, almost double the size of these. So they might still not even blossom next year. But so when I plant them in the landscape, I'll show you what I'm planning to do with them. But for right now, let's just take them apart. So here's one here that has like a little baby daffodil attached to it. So I'm just going to divide it very gently. I am standing on one side of my driveway going up the hill, and that's where I've decided to place all the daffodils. I want people to drive by or come up the driveway and see daffodils on both sides of my driveway. So I have dug a hole about 3 inches or so. And what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and start putting the bulbs in, and then I'm going to put a little bit of the soil that I got from the containers in the hole. And I'm going to try to cover it the best I can with the soil that I dug out here, and then I'm going to water it afterwards. In each of these holes, I'm putting between 10 to 15 bulbs, and I'm alternating. I'm doing some larger ones, medium-sized ones, and smaller ones, with the hopes that maybe next spring I'll have 1 or 2 blooms in each section. Like I've mentioned in many of my videos, I am patient. I'm willing to wait. I know that these bulbs came from a very special place, and they mean a lot to me. So if it takes a few years for them to do anything, I'm fine with that. I'm giving them enough space so that they have some room to grow still. I really don't want to divide them for another few years if I can help it. Now that I have them placed, I'm going to go ahead and put some soil in them, in the hole. Just making sure I push down. Now I'm just using some of the soil that was already here in the ground. It's pretty rocky and sandy, but daffodils are pretty resilient, so I think they'll be fine. When I dug out the holes, I just ended up with a big mat of roots. So I'm just trying to get some of the soil out of it. I'm going to press down a little. And it's not meant to look beautiful and pretty. It's just meant to keep the bulbs alive and feeding the green on the top of the bulbs. And then after the winter, they'll come back to life again. Give them a little bit of water. Okay, good. I am done. I'm going to go ahead and finish this job up along my driveway, and then I will give you a tour of what it looks like. So we're going to head down my driveway, and I'll show you some of the pretty things that are going on as we head down there. And on the left-hand side is my nursery bed that I made last year. I put a ton of my winter sown plants in this bed, as well as some plants that I divided. And I'm selling a lot of these plants on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. On the other side of the driveway is a beautiful flower bed. Just wanted to point that out. And now, as we head down the driveway, I want to show you spots where I planted the daffodils. So you can see them. They look sad right now, but they'll be fine. And I spaced them about somewhere between 10 to 15 feet apart from each other. And again, I did them in groupings of about 10 to 15 bulbs per hole. And I did it in a fashion where they're across from each other on either side of the driveway. In the summer, this area gets quite shady, but in the spring, there's a lot of sun because the trees haven't fully leafed out. So the daffodils should be fine. I can't wait. I've been wanting to do this for probably, I'd say, 3 years now. And I also have some hosta that my friend gave me planted up and down the driveway as well. And I planted those last fall. And I'm excited. I see that they are just barely peeking out of the ground. So once the daffodils have gone by each year, then the hosta will show up. And hopefully the deer will not find the hosta. Usually you want to divide your daffodils about every 3 to 5 years. So that's why I wanted to get them divided now, and then I'm good for a number of years. Black flies have been thick, let me tell you. I'm not sure about where you live, but I definitely have to wear one of those bug nets to be able to garden with how many black flies we have going on right now. So that's it. Those are all the daffodils I planted. This is what I'm left with now. And pretty much this whole section here are tulips. Some are still blooming, but they've almost gone by. And a lot of the other tulips have gone by. Some of them did not really do too much. But isn't that usually the nature of tulips? Some of these tulips were dug out of the ground. They were a few years old. I love tulips, but I just feel like after 1 to 2 years, you end up treating them as an annual. So they're just, at least in my garden, I really don't like to have them in the landscape. Plus the deer just will eat them up. And my plan for the tulips is I am going to just keep them in the pots for the spring and the summer. I'm going to keep the pots watered. That way it's still feeding the foliage and the bulbs. And then in the fall, I'm going to take all the bulbs out. And the first thing I'm going to do is make sure when I repot them, I don't put them in little tiny pots like this one. They really need to be in a little bit deeper pot. So that's one lesson that I learned. And I'm going to just take a whole bunch of them and just mix them all together in the least amount of pots possible. So I'd rather larger, bigger pots with more bulbs in it. That's my plan for the tulips. And then I have 2 pots here, 2 large pots. There's one here and one over there. Both of these were color blend daffodils that were given to me by my sister-in-law. And she gave them to me in the fall. They were beautiful. And I love having them in the pots. I kind of don't want to mix them with other daffodils in my landscape. I'm sure that some of them would be happy if I divided them. I'm going to also keep these in the pots they're in, keep them watered, and all spring, all summer. And in the fall, I will divide them a little bit, but I do plan on keeping them in 2, maybe 3 large pots. So that's my plan for these 2 pots. So I'm still talking about the pot from Color Blends, and there are still some very beautiful blossoms on here, but some have gone by, like this one. And what's happening here is the daffodil is starting to go to seed. And what I want to do is just remove the top part where the blossom was. I can still keep the stem, but you definitely want to deadhead your daffodils when they start going to seed like that, when they start going by. Deadhead that one. And I'm going to make sure that I do the same when these go by. And I also am going to do the same with the daffodils that are in my landscape. I have a couple of small pots here. They have some tulips in them, so they will get mixed with all of these tulips. And they also have some Glory of the Snow in them. So the Glory of the Snow will end up going in my landscape. So I did this video in hopes that it inspires you in the fall to definitely get some spring bulbs. Get them in your landscape, but maybe you don't have space in your landscape, or maybe you just want to have a lot of beautiful pots on your porches and things like that, and then know that what to do with those bulbs after they've gone by. So I will keep you posted on the progress of all of these, but until then, I hope you make it a great day with gardening.